So welcome to everyone, and I'm happy to see you again in our seminar series. Today we are very honored to host Marty Baron, Pulitzer-winning US journalist, editor and author, and I may say so, one of the most distinguished journalists of our time. Hello and good afternoon, good morning, Marty.
Morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights in these times of disruptions. My name is Daniela Kraus. I'm the Secretary General of Presse Club Concordia. I'm greeting you from Vienna, and Concordia has been committed to press freedom since 1859. And I'm joined by Mirjana Tomic. Hello, Mirjana.
Hello, Daniela.
Mirjana is the author and driving force behind this series of events on European and global issues. And this series has been supported by Erste Stiftung and is a cooperation with Forum for Journalism and Media, an institution for journalism training. We will talk for about 30 minutes with Marty Baron, and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions live and via chat. The session is also being recorded and will be available on YouTube for later viewing. That's it from my side, and I'd like to hand over to Mirjana, who will introduce Marty.
Hello, thank you so much, Daniela. Good morning, Marty. Good afternoon, everyone else. As Daniela said, my name is Mirjana Tomic, and I'm in charge of seminar series European Contexts. We focus on understanding politics and media in Europe, but what happens in the US has direct consequences in Europe. Those consequences are felt overnight these days. As Reuters news agency wrote this morning, the Trump administration had a busy night, launching new trade conflicts with top 3 US trading partners and pausing all US military aid to Ukraine. It is a true privilege to have Marty Baron as our speaker today. Baron, as Daniela said, is one of the most prominent US journalists and editors of his generation. He has overseen coverage and investigations leading to 18 Pulitzer Prizes. He was an executive editor until 2029 of the Washington Post and previously editor of the Boston Globe from 2001 to 2012. The Pulitzer Prize for Public Service was awarded to the Globe in 2003 for its investigation into a pattern of concealing clergy sex abuse in the Catholic Church, coverage that was later portrayed in the Academy Award-winning film Spotlight. Before the Globe, Baron held senior editing positions in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and Miami Herald. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Marty. I will start by quoting a paragraph from Marty's book, published in 2023, Collision of Power, Trump, Bezos, and the Washington Post. I quote, "Everything about Donald Trump, starting with his campaign, told me that he had the makings of an autocrat. How he celebrated violence against protesters during campaign rallies, how he strove to dehumanize the press, his threats to use presidential power to punish, even imprison opponents, his praise for strongmen, first and foremost Russia's Vladimir Putin, but also the Philippines' Rodrigo Duterte, Egypt's Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Hungary's Viktor Orban." One more quote, "As Trump took office, I felt the need to educate myself in a way I had never anticipated for an incoming president. The media had been unprepared for his brand of presidential campaign. All of my reading was concentrated on authoritarianism and the manipulation of public opinion." Marty, are you and the media prepared now for what we are witnessing? Turbo decisions and sometimes apparently random decisions in both internal and foreign affairs. Are you prepared for the role of someone like Elon Musk? What is new and what is old? What concerns you the most?
Well, it's very hard to be prepared for somebody like Donald Trump. Certainly, we saw during the campaign, we have, of course, a flavor of his personality and his intentions, the policies that he aimed to put into place, his desire to seek vengeance on his political enemies. So we heard all that. It's hard to anticipate that he would um, do all of that and more. I don't think that we anticipated that, although he did talk about having Elon Musk in the government, we didn't anticipate that he would essentially make Elon Musk what's effectively a co-president and the most powerful person in government other than himself, where he can essentially dictate to all the cabinet secretaries uh, who gets laid off, who gets fired, how they reorganize, whether their agencies even continue to exist, all of that. Nobody could anticipate that. Um, I think that, also there's always the expectation that to some degree that when somebody like Trump or when Trump got into office, that he would moderate to some degree. But he's gone way beyond, I think, what people anticipated. Um, Clearly, he had an affection of some sort or admiration for Vladimir Putin, certainly envied his powers, but I don't think there was an expectation that he would essentially signal that Putin and Russia were a closer friend than Europe, closer friend than Canada, all of that. That was hard to anticipate. So he has upended all expectations that anybody had of any moderation whatsoever, and it's basically his philosophy is that seems to be anything that occurred before I got here was absolutely wrong. Anything I do is absolutely right, and he is now surrounded by people who will not tell him no. They are sycophants. They are yes men, mostly men, as a matter of fact, and they will not argue with him, and they will just execute whatever it is he says, and that appears to be exactly what he wants.
How far do you think he can go or will go?
I think it can go quite far. I think in the United States, we've always thought that our democratic institutions were incredibly strong and that they could resist. But what we didn't really anticipate, I think we're discovering that these institutions are far more fragile than we imagined. And we didn't anticipate that people would capitulate as they clearly have. So we see a capitulation in Congress. It's a Republican-controlled Congress, both in the Senate and the House. And the Republicans in the Congress seem unwilling to actually exercise their own powers. They are a co-equal branch of government. I mean, actually, the founders of the country put more faith in Congress than they did in the President of the United States. But that requires Congress to actually do something to assert its own powers, and it does not appear to be willing to do that. The courts have been much better, and that's been an encouraging sign. The real question is, will Donald Trump, I mean, our system depends on a president and other citizens of the United States respecting the decisions of the courts. If Donald Trump decides to ignore those decisions, to defy those decisions, then we're in real trouble. And there are already signals that he will defy those decisions. His vice president, J.D. Vance, has argued during the campaign that the president didn't always need to abide by the rulings of even the Supreme Court. And already today, while he hasn't openly defied decisions of the courts, he seems to be ignoring them or slow walking them, basically not abiding by these decisions, saying that they're going to abide by them, but not actually doing so. So it can get a lot worse, and I think it will get a lot worse.
You mean worse on the international arena or internal arena or both? I just have a question here. It's a follow-up to what I just said. Although the decisions of US presidents have global impact, it is internal politics that decides the elections in the US and everywhere else. Do you think the Trump voters have expected the current policies, especially those related to federal government and the cuts? And do you anticipate any reaction by the voters? And I'm just wondering, as I was listening to you, people that surround him, are they scared of him, or they really believe what they're doing and what he is saying?
Well, there's been some erosion of support, but not significant, not what I would consider to be significant. About half the country still supports him, half the electorate still supports him, and half does not support him. He's seen some erosion among independents, 90% of Republicans still support him. 90% of Democrats are view him unfavorably. And independents, there's been some erosion in their views of him. I'm sorry, the second. So I don't see any significant change there yet. I think what will happen is that if people feel it very personally, the question was, do they actually support these policies? And did they anticipate this? They anticipated some of it. I think many Republicans support, they do feel that the government is bloated, that it has too many employees, that they're not doing anything, that they're inefficient. They probably accept on face value what Elon Musk is saying, that the cuts that he's making are due to waste, fraud, and abuse, although he hasn't really demonstrated any fraud. He just claims that it's fraud. So, he'll say that USAID, principal foreign aid organization of the United States, he calls it a criminal enterprise. And yet he hasn't pointed to any crimes. These are all functions that have been approved by Congress. Spending has been approved by Congress. They're spending in accordance with the wishes of Congress. So there's no fraud and there's no abuse. They're doing exactly what Congress wants, but they're not doing what Donald Trump wants or what Elon Musk wants. And then they describe that as fraud, waste, and abuse. So, but still, I think there are a lot of Americans who they think foreign aid is wasted, that money should be spent here in the United States. And why are we helping all these people around the world? We don't need to do that. Let them help themselves. With regard to foreign policy, I think there's a growing skepticism of alliances. I don't think that Trump actually believes in alliances. As I read somewhere recently, he sees them, I think this is correct, that he sees them more as a burden rather than a strength. I don't think anybody anticipated quite the degree to which he's cozying up to Vladimir Putin, although it was clear that he admired Putin and that somehow he found Putin credible, even more credible than his own intelligence agencies. So, it is a disturbing turn of events, and we'll have to see. I think support among Americans will erode if they feel this personally. So the tariffs is one thing that Americans are going to feel. They were hoping that Donald Trump would do what he said, which was to bring down prices of groceries and bring down the price of gas. Neither of those is declining at the moment, and inflation appears to be picking up. At the same time, the economy appears to be unsteady and potentially weakening. We'll see, if people see that gas prices go up, if they see that their food prices go up, if the cost of a car goes up, then they're not going to feel that Donald Trump is working on their behalf. And that goes directly to his voters who are in the so-called red states, the primarily Republican states. Many of those, by the way, are more dependent on government assistance than the blue states, the more democratic states. They have more government. They have more federal government workers there. They receive more in aid for people, Medicaid, which is assistance for the poor, Medicare, which is health care for the elderly, and then they receive all sorts of other benefits like food stamps and things like that. In the red states, where poverty is higher, the recipients of that kind of government aid are greater than they are elsewhere. And in addition to that, some of the universities in the red states are big recipients of research aid for scientific research, medical research, all of that. And they're already beginning to feel the pain in the way that Musk and his team are trying to reframe the formula for handing out aid to universities for research. So they give the impression that they're only going against these policies are only going to hurt the very wealthy elite universities like Harvard and what have you. But that's not true. It's going to hurt a lot of universities. And you already can see that some of the senators and members of the House from those districts, from those states, are beginning to complain about the impact that it's having on their constituents.
Thank you very much. There are thousands of more questions. I would like to pass the word to Daniela. How should media cover it all, knowing that the president has declared a war to media? Daniela, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mariana. I refer to your piece in The Atlantic of yesterday. I will post a link for everybody in the chat. And you wrote about Jeff Bezos. The billionaire handled his ownership admirably for more than a decade, but his courage failed him when he needed it most. As I see, you have known many of the key players in tech, and what is their role now? It's hard to understand from here, and why have they changed sides, or why are they so, well, not giving any contra, and what leverage does Trump have over them? And finally, what does that mean for journalism?
Sure. I think they have largely capitulated to Trump, or at least, they're trying to flatter him and placate him in some way, because out of fear, simply out of fear of regulation. The government certainly has the power to regulate the technology platforms on a variety of fronts, and they're concerned about that. Trump himself, actually, during the campaign, he threatened to imprison Mark Zuckerberg of Meta / Facebook, and because of donations that he had previously made to help ensure free and fair elections in the United States. And Trump and his allies interpreted that as being contrary to his interests and his campaign. So Mark Zuckerberg has done a complete U-turn. He's now getting Trump supporters onto the board of Meta, particularly one in particular. He's giving extensive interviews to right-wing podcaster, talking about how we need more masculine energy in American society, which appeals to the sort of the young male vote for Donald Trump. He's talking about a whole range of things like that, and the others, including Bezos, I think fears the impact that it has on his other commercial interests that are substantially larger than the Washington Post by a lot.
Sure.
Many times larger. So Amazon, which is a source of his wealth, has big contracts with the federal government for cloud computing services, and cloud computing is the single most profitable area of its business, and its contracts with the government have been an area of substantial growth. At the same time, his commercial space venture, Blue Origin, is at a key moment, an inflection point. It only recently successfully launched a rocket into orbit, and it now hopes to compete aggressively with SpaceX, which of course is owned by Elon Musk, a traditional rival, a commercial rival of Jeff Bezos. And Elon Musk, of course, prior to Trump entering the White House, was camped out at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's residence in Florida, and now is camped out at the White House and has more power than anybody but Donald Trump. Far more power than any member of Trump's government than except for Donald Trump. And so there's fear. I mean, Trump, has talked. I mean, when he gave an interview to Bob Woodward and Bob Costa, who were journalists for the Washington Post, for a book that they did, and he said, "Real power is fear." He said, "Oh, I hate to say that, but real power is fear." Well, I'm sure he didn't hate to say that, but he said it, and that is his view. Is that he always resorts to the same strategy, and that is force, bullying, intimidation, harassment, punish other people, all of that. He will try for like a split second to try charm, but if that doesn't work instantaneously, then he resorts to bullying and force. That's who he is.
Are there any of the tech guys who resist, who are not afraid, or is it everybody?
The founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, is a big Democratic supporter. So he has sort of been on the opposite side of the equation, but there aren't very many others, I would say.
And now I want to ask you, what do you think are the right strategies now for journalists and legacy media? I mean, we are in totally uncharted waters, and well, as you said before, nobody could expect the scope of what is happening now. But what does it mean for journalists and newspapers and media houses that are still trying to do fact-based journalism?
Well, I think we should do our job and do it well. I think we have an important job in any democracy, and we should report and then report more and report more, and make sure that everything is verified, make sure that we have our facts right, make sure that we've put things in proper context. We shouldn't condescend to anybody. We shouldn't placate anybody. We should act independently. I think that's the source, that should be the source of our credibility. And tell people what's happening in their government. Ultimately, citizens get to decide what kind of government they want. As long as we maintain a democracy, they get that decision. And so we have the opportunity and the duty in a democracy to report aggressively on what government is doing. Here in the United States, of course, with the president. The president is the most powerful person in the world. I think there's no doubt about that. And we have an absolute duty to report aggressively on him. That is exactly why the founders of this country provided for a free and independent press in the Constitution and the First Amendment. James Madison, who was the principal author of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, talked about it by talking about the need for freely examining public characters and measures. Public characters being government officials and the people with power who influence them, the measures being the policies that affect people's daily lives. Free, I think we understand that word, but I would focus on the word examining, and that is that we're supposed to look behind the curtain and beneath the surface. We're not just stenographers. I don't believe we're activists either, and we shouldn't be, in my view, but we should be independent journalists, reporters, finding out what's happening in the government and then telling the public what it needs and deserves to know.
In your view, who is doing a particularly good job now? Which news organizations?
Quite a few. I think the Washington Post is doing an excellent job. I mean, I should say I'm upset over a lot of the things that Jeff Bezos is doing lately, but he has not interfered in the news coverage. He did not when I was there. I make that clear in the book that I wrote. And I've heard of no interference since, and I don't believe there's been any interference because I'm sure I would have heard about it and you would have heard about it because as I think we all know, newsrooms are the leakiest places on earth. People would scream if there was intervention on his part, and they would make it known to the world. And there's been not one story of that sort, no evidence. So the Post, day in and day out, is doing a really terrific job, really stellar journalism, revelatory journalism, and they've been very energetic in their coverage, and I applaud them for that. The New York Times is also doing a great job. Some of the major networks, NBC, CBS, some of the others. I think some of the magazines are doing great. The Atlantic, New Yorker. There are other people who are. The Wall Street Journal has been, in terms of news coverage, and has been doing great work. And even its editorials, which is its conservative editorial page, but they've been sharply critical of Donald Trump on a variety of fronts. Using very pointed language and criticizing his tariffs, of course. They did that again today. Sharply critical of Trump's meeting with Zelensky and how Trump handled himself. So I think there's been a tremendous amount of good work, and I think that's what people ought to continue doing that.
May I just step in one question? You have mentioned the media that we also follow from this side of the ocean. That is the media that we know. I'm just wondering, what is the outreach of the media houses, media outlets that you have mentioned? What is their outreach, among the American population and voters?
Media consumption is very polarized in this country, as I think it has become in other countries as well. And so, the percentage of readers who subscribe or read the New York Times is in the single digits. It's not above 10%. Same thing for the Washington Post. It's not above 10%. And same thing with the major networks. So people who are Trump supporters, they watch Fox News, and they are in a different universe than people who don't watch Fox News. And while there's some fact-based reporting on Fox News is completely dominated by opinion, which is not facts, which are not facts-based. A lot of their hosts who are saying things that are absolutely untrue, and they are functioning essentially as propagandists for the Trump administration. I mean, look, where did Trump get so many members of his government? I don't know what the latest number is, but I think it was 18 last I looked. People were coming. He hired them from Fox News. And who do they give interviews to? Fox News, far less to the major networks and far less to media outlets. Every single day, when I look at a story, it says the Defense Department wouldn't comment. The Department of State wouldn't comment. The Department of Health and Human Services wouldn't comment. They just won't interact with many traditional media outlets. But then if the story upsets them, which it often does, they then go criticize those outlets, and that's their interaction. So it's a tough situation. It's not clear that a news organization can attract people with different points of view. They ought to try. I think they should try by having a variety of opinions on their opinion pages, for example. That's one way, although Bezos has decided there should really be only one set of opinions on their opinion pages. That's a mistake in my view, particularly if you're trying to reach a bigger audience. And then, of course, the reporting should reflect the totality of our society. We should not condescend to anybody. We should not hold anybody in contempt. We should be getting around the country here in the United States and reflecting the lives of all people, including those who support Donald Trump. Most people's lives have nothing to do with politics, by the way. They're just trying to make a living. They're just trying to provide for their families, get an education for their kids, and hope that their kids live better lives than they did. And we need to reflect, what their struggles are, what their aspirations are, what their expectations are, all of that. If we do that well, we do it regularly, I think people will have more confidence in us. That's a long-term proposition. And I also think we need to be much more transparent about how we go about our work, showing our work more than just telling people what we've learned to be true, but showing what we relied upon in order to do that work. Providing our methodology, showing the entirety of documents and videos and audios and data sets and what have you, so that with the message being, check our work. Check our work. You have the right to do that. We're giving you the opportunity to do that. And if you see a mistake, let us know about it.
Thank you, Daniela. Will you start with some of the questions? I'm also happy, we are happy to take questions live. So I will manage those live. Just raise your hand and Daniela will start reading the questions that are in the chat.
Which are quite a lot. I'm starting with the media-related question series, one by Matthew Stevens, Americans a Broadcast. He asks, has the fourth estate been pushed aside by competing technologies like social media to an extent that the public is incapable of democratic decision-making in their own interests?
I'm sorry, has what been pushed aside?
To an extent that the public is incapable of democratic decision-making in their own interests. And there's another one on media, which is by Sona Vaisova. And she asks, what is your take on the fact that the member of Russia's state-owned news agency gained access to the Oval Office on Friday to cover President Trump's sit-down with Zelensky, even as the AP and Reuters were barred from the high-level meeting?
Right. So I do think clearly a lot of people don't get their information from traditional media. They don't even get their information from any media. They get their information from friends and family and across the transom. There are recent surveys that show that about a third of Americans, for example, rely on absolutely no media outlet whatsoever. And they get what they consider to be news from friends, family, and wherever. And then, maybe another third are relying upon social media, whatever social media they're drawn to. People tend to be drawn to the social media that reinforces their pre-existing point of view, and essentially tells them that they're always right, regardless of whatever they might believe. And then the rest are sort of go to traditional media, and they tend to go to traditional media with which they feel comfortable, which portrays the world in which where they feel comfortable. So we are at a time where it's a very difficult time because we do not share a common set of facts. The societies do not share a common set of facts, and it's actually worse than that. We can't even agree on how to determine what a fact is. What methodologies do we use to determine what a fact is? I always point out that all of the things that we've used in the past to determine what a fact is have been devalued. What are those? Education, expertise, experience, and above all, actual evidence. And all of those have been devalued. They get denied. They're denigrated. They're dismissed, and that's a very dangerous place to be. And that's something we have to work at. I mean, my view is that we're not going to persuade everybody. We need to work on getting another 5% who believe in facts. That's basically it. And is that an achievable goal? I think it is. And I think there are some methodologies that can be used to do that. One is radical transparency in how we go about our work is really important. Showing our work, not just telling people things. And if we get another 5%, well, that can change the world. If we get another 5%, let's work on another 5% on top of that. In terms of state-owned, Russia state-owned media being in the White House, doesn't surprise me at all. Early in the Trump administration and in the first term in 2017, he met with the Russian foreign minister in the White House, and the only media that was in the White House was Russian media at the time, which was extraordinary. And it looks like, Trump is trying to do everything he possibly can to ingratiate himself in some way to Vladimir Putin. I don't know why he particularly needs to do that, but he seems to think he needs to be best buddies with Putin in order for there to be peace in the world. I think there are others who view that being best buddies with Putin is not likely to lead to peace, but more likely to lead to conflict. But in any event, so I'm sure that was a signal that, hey, you can come into the White House like all other media and ask questions. I'd like to see the Kremlin respond in kind. They don't. There's still many foreign news outlets who cannot put their own correspondents in Russia for fear that they will be arrested and incarcerated and prosecuted and incarcerated. Why doesn't he insist? I mean, the question is, why doesn't he insist that Russia reciprocate, do the same thing? They're not. I mean, look, he just announced that they just disclosed that it's just been disclosed that the United States has ended offensive cyber operations against Russia. I don't know that the Russians have reciprocated. They haven't stopped offensive cyber operations against the United States. Why is there no demand for reciprocity? That's a big question, I think, that the White House has yet to answer. And it's a question that, for example, Ukraine is asking. Well, you're asking for concessions from us. What concessions are you asking for from Russia? What are they willing to offer? You're putting pressure on us. What kind of pressure are you putting on them? That's not a question that the administration has answered. So in any event, I'm not surprised at all that he would invite Russia state-owned media into the White House. He did it in 2017, and here we go again.
Tessa, please go ahead, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Tessa Szyszkowicz. Marty, thank you very much for coming on this call with us. I was wondering, you said that the editorial teams in the Washington Post and the other sort of legacy papers are doing a very good job. But I wonder if that is possible to do the same stories as they did over the years and when you were editor at the Washington Post, in terms of bringing, like Barton Gellman brought the Snowden files, or looking into Trump's sort of fake philanthropy things. Is that something that you expect our colleagues in the legacy media to be able to still do? Or will someone like Jeff Bezos then say, like, okay, this is not what will be looked at in the White House as something that we will support?
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, I think right now they are doing revelatory work, strong investigative work at the Washington Post and elsewhere. We've learned a lot about what Elon Musk's team, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which is not actually a real department, but they call it that, is doing, particularly the access that his young team, they're in the 20s, many of them, one is 19 for that matter, and they're getting access to it's been revealed how much access they're getting to the private information of American citizens, access to all of the payments of the Treasury Department, and the Treasury Department handles all payments by the U.S. government, and then access to Social Security records, which provides a lot of private information, including health information about Americans, and then access to people's tax returns. They're striving to get access to all tax return information, which tells you everything. So, I mean, that's extraordinary, and I think people are deeply concerned about that level of access. People have called into question the ridiculous claims that have been made by Musk and others about the kinds of savings that they're finding. They're not adding up. Many of these savings are a total fantasy. These numbers are just invented. They've made numerous mistakes. They're reporting aggressively on how so-called DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is actually handling themselves, how they're comporting themselves. They've reported on how Elon Musk himself may be benefiting from his power. The Washington Post recently reported that a contract for the Federal Aviation Administration, which regulates airlines and the air traffic control system, they were in a contract, a $2 billion contract, I believe the number was, with the company Verizon. And suddenly it looks like they may be giving they're canceling that contract with Verizon and giving it to Elon Musk's company to handle, even as Elon Musk has his team at the FAA now advising them. That's a huge conflict of interest. I think that issue of prospective corruption, that people will be making decisions that benefit themselves, is going to be a big one. And I think that's something that people are looking at very, very aggressively. The latest, statement by Trump that he wants to create a cryptocurrency reserve. Well, he has his own crypto, and Melania has a crypto as well, and they benefit from that. The value of crypto has gone up, and these are all things that I think people are reporting on. The big sensitivity undoubtedly will be the area of national security. If there is something like Snowden, where somebody does leak sensitive national security information, or even not so sensitive, with Trump, he'll claim that it's super sensitive, even if it isn't. But anything that's classified, I think that this administration is salivating for the opportunity to prosecute not just individual journalists, but their editors, their publishers, and their owners. And I said in my book, I wrote that would be a big test for Jeff Bezos if that were to come up during his ownership. I mean, we did end up publishing national security secrets while he was there, but nothing on the order of Snowden. And the question will be, will he and his current publisher be willing to proceed with publication? And that will be the ultimate test. And I think we'll have to wait and see whether he is, because he has a lot at stake. A lot of that those cloud computing services of Amazon, they're provided to the intelligence agencies, and Trump and his team are just waiting for the opportunity to prosecute. I can pretty much guarantee you that.
Michaela Patek asks, from here in Europe, it seems that the opposition in the US has almost disappeared, remaining in shock. Where are the democratic leaders And when will people step up? That's the first question. And then there's another one. Do you think the midterm elections will bring any change?
Well, I think that the Democrats are certainly trying to figure out how to respond to Trump. There are those who believe that the Democratic leadership should speak up forcefully at every opportunity, and there are others who feel that it's better to pick their shots, to be more selective, and decide really what are the issues that they should speak out on, and how should they speak up about it. So they're the latter group is one that feels that if you just complain all the time, it just looks like it's politics as usual, and you can't accept you just don't want to accept the results of the election. The former group believes that horrible things are happening, and that the party needs to stake out clear opposition to all of this. And so that's the division. I think over time, it'll become more, the Democrats will speak out a lot more, particularly when you see the impact of tariffs, if you see the economy starting to weaken, if you start to see alliances begin to break apart, if you see Trump more and more aligning with Vladimir Putin and against our traditional, our decades old friends, then I think you'll start to hear the Democratic Party speaking up a lot more. We're only about 5 weeks into this. Believe it or not, it might seem like 5 years, but it's 5 weeks. We're into this this administration, and I think that you will hear. My guess is that you will hear Democrats speaking up more frequently and more forcefully.
Mm-hmm.
Question is, I'm sorry. What was the other one?
About the midterm elections.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, who knows? I mean, I'm not a election forecaster. I don't want to be a pundit about that. Who knows? I mean, I think Democrats will be more motivated. I think a lot of the people who didn't vote in this last election because of disaffection with Joe Biden on a variety of fronts, whether it's the economy or Gaza or God knows a variety of issues, immigration, things like that, might be motivated to vote for Democrats. We'll see. Immigration is actually a point of popularity for Trump. Most Americans actually support his policy with regard to immigration. The sort of illegal crossings across the southern border were at a record level in the first 3 years of the Biden administration, and I think most Americans feel that was completely out of control and needs to be brought under control. So, as in Europe, immigration is a very important issue and one that can determine the results of elections. And so people support Trump on that issue, no question about it. But if people start to feel economically that they're worse off rather than better off, if the economy starts to stumble badly, if prices are going up and jobs are evaporating, then I think it's quite possible that a lot of people will turn out in the elections and vote for Democrats. Keep in mind that the Republicans do not have a big majority in either the Senate or the House. Trump did not win. I mean, it was a decisive victory, but it was not a mandate in the way that anybody defines it. It was not a landslide, the way that he says. He won by 1.5 percentage points over Kamala Harris. That was his vote percentage was 1.5 percentage points above hers. And he did not actually win a majority of voters because there were some third-party candidates in there. So he won very slightly less than half of the country. So Democrats, whether they'll be successful, who knows? The Democratic Party is it's not a finely run machine, from what I can tell, and they have yet to polish their message. They're not really good at that.
Excuse me, may I jump in with a very short question? You said that Trump has not won with a big majority, but he behaves as if he had won with 90% of votes. What gives him that freedom to act like that? And he both him and Elon Musk start so many replies to questions by saying that people have voted us. They have voted for what we promised.
Yeah, that's what they say. So they did vote for him. He won the election. He but the reason they can do it is because they control both houses of Congress, and Trump controls the Republican Party. So that you put those two together, they control both houses of Congress, the House and the Senate, and he controls the party. They should change the name of the party from the Republican Party to the Trump Party or the MAGA Party, because it's not really the Republican Party as we once knew it. It is a completely different party today, and it is a party that is that essentially swears allegiance as much to Donald Trump as they do to the Constitution. And I'm not sure which one weighs more heavily in their minds, but they are unwilling at this point. Almost all Republicans are unwilling at this point to challenge Donald Trump on anything for fear. We go back to fear. Fear that they, when a primary comes up, that they will lose because Donald Trump will endorse their opponent, and Trump supporters dominate the primaries. So they're fearful of losing their job. The strange thing is that they have, because of their fear of losing a primary, they have ceded to Donald Trump essentially all the powers that they themselves held before. They are unwilling to actually assert their own power. So they are striving to get reelected to positions that are left without any power because they haven't asserted any power. And so I'm not sure what they see in these jobs. It's not clear to me that many of them have any real core principles other than we support whatever Donald Trump says. And the jobs don't really have any power, or they're losing all their power because they've given it all, gifted it they've given it as a gift to Donald Trump because they won't assert their own prerogatives.
Okay, we're going back to the tech guys. Do you think the relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump is bound to collapse? And if so, what could trigger it? That's the first question. And then there's another one on Sam Altman of OpenAI, and what role does he play in this game?
Well, I don't know what role Sam Altman's going to play. I mean, he's a bit of a rival of Elon Musk as well, I gather. So I don't know how to answer the second one. Will Trump's relationship with Musk deteriorate over time? Who knows? I mean, look, his relationship with many people has deteriorated over time. So, I mean, I joke that, Time Magazine every year declares Person of the Year. And I joke that one way that Trump could have a fallout with Elon Musk is if Time Magazine had named Elon Musk Person of the Year instead of Donald Trump. But lo and behold, they named Donald Trump Person of the Year. So I think who knows whether there'll be a fallout. I think he likes having someone who's as smart and entrepreneurial as Elon Musk around. It makes him look kind of with it. It's somebody to do the dirty work that he would rather not do himself. I don't see any indication yet that it's really fraying. I mean, it's quite possible that Elon Musk will find himself at odds with a lot of the cabinet secretaries and other agency heads because he's essentially dictating how many people they're going to have on their staff, which people they're going to have on their staff, who gets fired, who doesn't get fired, based on whatever his team of 20-year-olds has decided, whose jobs aren't necessary, usually without talking to anybody, without actually doing any research. So the result is that they fire federal government employees who are responsible for protecting nuclear weapons. Crazy. They're firing park rangers, and as a result, there's 1.5 hour waiting lines to get into a national park. They fired people who were responsible for making sure that bird flu doesn't get out of control in the country, and then they end up rehiring these people. So this team doesn't seem to want to actually investigate. They just want to look at the numbers, the data, run their algorithm, whatever algorithms they have on AI, and then decide, well, these jobs aren't necessary, these jobs are, without actually talking to anybody. They're doing that a lot based on, I guess, keywords and things like that. But So if that ends up being a big mess, I'm sure Trump will find somebody to blame. Maybe Elon will be the one to blame. He always blames somebody for something. He never takes any responsibility himself for any problem. It's always somebody else messed up badly. And I mean, you look at his former members of his cabinet and how many he has had a falling out with. I mean, some of you are just shocked at. I mean, Mike Pompeo was his Secretary of State, was a big supporter of his. It's true, Pompeo considered actually running against Trump in the primary. He's had a few minor critical things to say about Trump. Well, as a result of that, Trump, and of course, because of the previous administration's posture toward Iran, Mike Pompeo received federal security protection for himself because there had been credible threats that Iran would try to assassinate him. And Trump just decided that he was going to end federal security protection for Mike Pompeo. And clearly he felt aggrieved because Mike Pompeo had considered running against him and made a few minor critical remarks about him. And that was all it took in order to sever the relationship with him and make the extraordinary decision to deny him federal security protection. So, and then Trump has said that, you know, he's been asked about, he's denied security protection to a lot of people at this point. And he was asked whether if harm came to those individuals, would he feel any responsibility? And of course, since he never takes responsibility, he said no, he wouldn't feel any responsibility because, oh, they made a lot of money in their lives. They could just go pay for their own security protection.
Mm-hmm. Nikita Reichelke has a lot of questions, but I just want to pick out one. He writes, it appears to me that the left and progressive media assumes people to be far more rational than they actually are. How should we deal as journalists with that problem?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that people are not nearly as rational as we think they are. That's not how people make decisions. You know, when people decide how they're going to vote, they don't sit there looking at the policy positions of this person and then the policy positions of this person. They check off whether I agree with this person more than I agree with that person. That's just not how people make decisions. We live in a society that's fundamentally tribal. It's like, who do I feel comfortable? Who do I think speaks for me? Who's speaking to me in a way that I kind of like and I'm connecting with? Who are my friends voting for? Who are they suggesting I should vote for, et cetera? So it's much more emotional than it is rational. I think that means we have to change the way we communicate as journalists. Look, we can see today that influencers are having a lot of success. They're connecting with people with greater effectiveness than traditional media organizations, influencers, podcasters, you name it, a lot of people in new media. And what's happening there is that they're communicating greater authenticity, a lot of authenticity. And when they communicate authenticity, people think they're speaking with authority. They may deserve that authority. Some do, you know, but a lot don't. Because they haven't done any reporting, they haven't done any research, they're just whatever. They're just trying to pander to their audience and develop an audience. Not all of them, but many of them. And so what do we in the traditional media, we think we deserve the authority, and in many instances we do, because we've done a lot of research. We have reporters who are highly experienced. They've studied this. They have sources. They've spent years investigating these issues, what have you. But we're not communicating with authenticity. And when you don't communicate with authenticity, then people think you don't have the authority. They don't trust institutions. Increasingly, people distrust institutions. And so we need to find a way to change our form of communication. That requires a radical change on the part of traditional journalists and a willingness to accept that and to acknowledge that our communication is not working as well as it should. We are working for communications companies, but we are not succeeding as communicators. We are failing as communicators. So we need to learn from podcasters, we need to learn from influencers, and we need to find ways to communicate, whether it's through podcasts or short form video, the work that we're doing while still adhering to our traditional standards. Now, people may think that's impossible, but I don't think it's impossible. And I don't think that we should resist that. in the way that we resisted the digital transformation, which we did. We were stubborn and slow and clumsy and stupid. And we shouldn't do that today. We should say, look, there's something's working out there, influences that's working, podcasters that's working. What do we do? How do we change the way that we communicate with the public so that we can be more effective in conveying the information with the authority that we actually have?
May I ask a question, Daniela and Marty? Listening to you, it sounds almost that Trump has more power than Vladimir Putin. Maybe I have this impression because we have done quite a lot of events with Russian colleagues in exile, etc. But that's not my question. My question is, what we are experiencing now, these 5 weeks or 6 weeks that seem like 5 years, and there is still a lot more time to come. Do you think this will be an interlude? Let's hold for 4 years, or do you think we are experiencing a radical change in the US society that will not be easy to repair in 4 years?
Well, I think there's a real prospect that it'll be a radical change in U.S. society that will be very difficult to reverse. I think we all know from having observed how authoritarian governments come into existence that it's once they do come into existence that it's very hard to reverse course, to restore democracy, to restore all the pillars of democracy. Once the pillars of democracy, the institutions that we depend on, have been have deteriorated or been entirely demolished, it's hard to build those back up again. It's so easy to destroy, and it's so hard to build. So I think there's a real prospect that we will be, in 4 years, will be a radically different country, and it'll be a radically different world. I think a lot of that will depend on whether Trump's policies succeed or fail. So if the result is that we end up having high inflation in the United States, if we end up having an economy that falls apart, if we find ourselves in conflicts that are completely unnecessary, then I think Trump will pay the price, assuming that we actually have free and fair elections in 2 years and in 4 years. And that, frankly, is an assumption, to be honest with you. But if we still have free and fair elections in 2 years and 4 years, well, if the economy is doing poorly, then there could be a very different result. As I said, in a lot of districts, first of all, the Republicans do not have a big margin in the House. They don't have a big margin in the Senate. Many of the districts that voted for Trump could switch with just 5% of the voters switching sides can change the composition of Congress. And if then you have a different Congress, even in one of the houses, the House or the Senate, then you would see a lot of resistance and real difficulty for Trump. But right now, I think he's on a path to try to undermine the democratic institutions that we have. He's seeking to undermine any independent arbiter of fact other than himself. And I'm not just talking about the press here, although the press factor is very big in that. I'm talking about judges. I'm talking about, you name it, the courts, scientists, anybody, to be an independent arbiter of fact other than himself. And so that's a risky place to be. And all of us who believe in democracy, even if we have different political views, which is fine because that's the nature of democracy, we should have a debate over what the policies are. But I think all of us who believe in democracy should really work hard to do what we can to defend the institutions that are necessary in order to maintain a democracy.
Thank you very much. We're almost, time is almost out. If you have 5 minutes, Matthew Stevens, introduce yourself and ask a very short question.
I'm an American podcaster here in Vienna, and I was wondering, do you see American journalists in the United States preparing to change the way they do their jobs so that they can still do their jobs in an openly hostile environment where freedom of the press is really not available to them? And are there lessons from other countries where freedom
Thank
of
you
the
very
press
much.
Are we changing the way we do our jobs? Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. Are you prepared to operate in a hostile environment where the government is coming after journalists who try to do their jobs reporting on what the government is doing?
I don't know. I hope so. I mean, I think that they're doing a good job so far, but we're only 5 weeks into this administration. I think the journalists are showing a lot of spine and doing a lot of good work, most of them for traditional media. And we're seeing the results of that every day with some great stories that tell us what's happening in our government. I worry more about the ownership because many of the media organizations, particularly the television networks, are owned by corporations. They have other interests. Disney owns ABC. Paramount owns CBS, which now is proposing a merger with Skydance, and hopes that the merger will be approved. But the Trump administration is not happy with CBS, has litigated against CBS. Trump himself has litigated against CBS. So I worry about the ownership, including the ownership of the Washington Post now, which had Bezos had done so well when I was there, and now I'm disturbed about his what he's done. So I think a lot depends on that. Not so much the individual journalists, who I think are willing to do their jobs, but the ownership could come under great pressure, and we've seen that. For example, I mentioned Bezos, but also at the Los Angeles Times, where the owner seems to be doing everything possible to pander to the Trump administration, placate the Trump administration.
Thank you. And the last question, Nikita Reichelt, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm the guy with a lot of questions. I'm a journalist from a community radio in Graz. Maybe just one thing of my question was about the media strategy of the far right. So the outrage about their provocations is calculated in their strategy. So should we as journalists more focused about setting our own topics and reframe the whole thing? Or should we still respond to every provocation? Steve Bannon said this: as long as we keep the Democrats talking about racism, we win.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't think we have to respond to every provocation of theirs. I'm not sure that it does any good. I think we should, on occasion, when it really makes sense, when it's really consequential, we need to put out the facts just to have it on the record, and to demonstrate as best we can with actual evidence that what we're saying is true. I think we should have our own agenda as to what we cover. That doesn't mean that every subject we choose to do is going to resonate with the far right, for example, or even the far left, for that matter. But we should have our own agendas, what we think is important, and do our jobs rigorously, and make sure that we get our facts right, put it in proper context, tell people what we find to be true, and go from there.
Thank you so much, Martin. And as you said earlier, well, thank you for this. As you said earlier, we have to defend democracy through media and other means, wherever we work. I thank you for the conversation, and I'm afraid this is only the beginning. It's only 5 weeks. Thank you so much, and I hope to have you as a guest again. Thank you, Daniela.
Thanks. Good luck to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mirjana. Thank you to everybody for joining.